Let us dust off the archives from the 1920s, a critical juncture where the divergence between natural physics and synthetic chemistry was not yet solidified. In the fields of France, a man named Justin Christofleau was quietly dismantling the necessity of the fertilizer industry before it even fully tightened its grip on the world. He was not a mystic mumbling over seedlings. He was a rigorous inventor who held patent number 519563, a technical blueprint that should have revolutionized global food production but was instead relegated to the shadows. Christofleau understood a fundamental truth that we have forgotten. The atmosphere is a vast, dynamic reservoir of electricity, and plants are designed by evolution to act as natural antennas. He didn't just theorize about this invisible potential, he engineered a way to harness it. His apparatus was deceptively simple, yet physically profound, a vertical wooden pole topped with a metallic point aimed at the zenith, capturing atmospheric electricity and channeling it down through conductive copper and zinc wires directly into the soil. This created a closed circuit, a terrestrial battery that stimulated microbial life and accelerated root systems through pure currents. The results documented in his time were nothing short of scandalous to the emerging dogma of modern agronomy. We are talking about oats growing to unprecedented heights of over 2 meters and cabbages swelling to nearly 10 kilograms, all achieved without a single gram of manure or chemical additives. The scientific community of the time was forced to acknowledge these anomalies. Official reports from the mid-1920s confirmed that crops treated with his electromagnetic terrestrial currents did not just survive. They thrived with a vitality that baffled observers. Pests like phylloxera, the scourge of vineyards, simply vanished from his treated vines, unable to withstand the altered vibrational frequency of the plants. This was verifiable, patent-protected, and physically grounded science. Yet, you will not find his name in your standard agricultural textbooks today. Why? Because a one-time installation of copper and zinc offers zero recurring revenue for a corporation selling sacks of nitrates. Christofleau didn't just grow food, he inadvertently declared war on a business model, and for that, his work was buried under the convenient, suffocating label of obsolescence. To understand why the electromagnetic solution was abandoned, we must look not at the garden, but at the factory floor in the aftermath of 1945. The Second World War had mobilized a colossal industrial machine dedicated to fixing nitrogen from the air to create ammonium nitrate, the primary ingredient for high-explosive munitions. When the guns fell silent, the global powers were left with a massive surplus of infrastructure and stockpiles of chemicals with no enemy to destroy. They faced a choice: dismantle this lucrative engine or find a new market. They chose the latter, and the target was the soil. The transition was seamless and terrifyingly logical. The same chemical compounds used to level cities were rebranded as Miracle Grow for agriculture. The Haber-Bosch process, once the heartbeat of warfare, became the heartbeat of farming. This was not a shift driven by biological necessity. It was an economic rescue mission for the chemical conglomerates. Suddenly, agriculture was no longer about biology or physics. It was about chemistry and commerce. The narrative was rewritten to convince the farmer that the soil was an empty vessel, devoid of worth until purchased inputs were added. In this new economic landscape, technologies like Christofleau's electromagnetic towers became an existential threat. Consider the business model. A copper antenna is a one-time purchase that lasts for decades, harvesting free energy from the environment. A sack of NPK fertilizer is a consumable product that must be bought every single season, creating a perfect loop of dependency. If you were a titan of industry sitting on a mountain of nitrates, which system would you fund? Which science would you endow at universities? The physics of nature was not debunked. It was simply defunded and drowned out by the roar of a new profitable orthodoxy that turned the independent farmer into a perpetual customer. To grasp the mechanism, you must stop looking at the Earth as a solid rock and start viewing it as an electrical component, specifically a spherical capacitor. Above your head, the ionosphere is charged with hundreds of thousands of volts of positive potential. Beneath your boots, the ground carries a negative charge. We are walking between two terminals of a colossal battery, living in a constant vertical voltage gradient, averaging about 100 to 150 volts per meter near the surface. This is not science fiction. This is atmospheric physics. Plants are not passive observers in this circuit. They are the wires. Evolution has optimized them to act as biological conductors that bridge this gap, drawing the atmospheric potential down into the root zone. This flow of energy is inextricably linked to telluric currents, natural electric currents moving underground, generated by the planet's rotation and solar winds. But there is a rhythm to this flow. It is synchronized with the Schumann resonance, the Earth's electromagnetic heartbeat vibrating at a fundamental frequency of 7.83 Hertz. This is the macro environment your plants were designed for. When a seed germinates, it doesn't just need water and sunlight, it seeks connection to this geoelectric grid. The natural background voltage drives the metabolic engines of the biosphere. Yet, we place our crops in rubber-lined pots, indoors under artificial lights, or in dead, non-conductive soil, effectively unplugging them from the main power source. We starve them of the very frequency that dictates biological time, and then we wonder why they are weak, why they require constant chemical support. We have severed the connection to the motherboard. Now we descend into the microscopic theater of the cell, where the true, undeniable physics takes place. Forget the word magic. This is strict electrochemistry. Every nutrient your plant devours, whether it is nitrogen, potassium, or magnesium, is not just a dead chemical. It is an ion, a charged particle carrying a specific positive or negative electrical signature. In the absence of an optimized field, these ions move chaotically, relying on passive diffusion or active transport that consumes the plant's precious energy reserves. When you introduce a magnetic field or a copper antenna system, you are not whispering to the plant. You are constructing a superhighway for these charged particles. According to the laws of electromagnetism, specifically the Lorentz force, a moving charge within a magnetic field experiences a physical force that directs its path. When you apply this principle to a root system, you are physically influencing the permeability of the cell membranes. You are unlocking the gates. Modern biophysics has identified the calcium ion channels as a primary receptor for these forces. Calcium is the universal signaling molecule in plant biology, responsible for triggering cell division and immune responses. By manipulating the local magnetic environment, we stimulate the flux of calcium ions across the plasma membrane, effectively signaling the plant's metabolism to shift into a higher gear without the need for synthetic hormones. Furthermore, consider the very blood of the plant, chlorophyll. At the center of every chlorophyll molecule sits a magnesium ion, just as iron sits at the center of our hemoglobin. These elements are paramagnetic, meaning they are sensitive to magnetic fields. By aligning the magnetic environment, we reduce the chaotic thermal motion of these particles, streamlining the flow of sap and nutrients against the force of gravity. It is the difference between pushing water through a twisted, kinked hose versus a straight pressurized pipe. The plant spends less energy fighting internal resistance and more energy building fruit and leaves. This is efficiency at the molecular level, invisible to the naked eye but undeniable on the harvest scale. If you still suspect this is merely the nostalgia of forgotten history, let us fast forward to the present day. The pseudoscience label has been shattered by peer-reviewed data emerging from one of the most technologically aggressive nations on Earth. In recent years, China has quietly deployed the largest electroculture experiment in human history, spanning over 3,600 hectares of greenhouses. The results are not anecdotal. They are agricultural statistics that demand attention. Researchers at the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences have reported that vegetable yields increased by 20% to 30% when grown under high-voltage electric fields. But yield is only half the story. The usage of pesticides dropped by a staggering 70% to 100%. Why? Because the enhanced electrical environment accelerates the plant's natural metabolic defense systems, making them inhospitable to pests. This is the modern validation of a century-old theory, proven on a commercial scale. Western academia is also catching up. Studies published in journals like Bioelectromagnetics have confirmed that pre-treating seeds with static magnetic fields significantly increases germination rates and seedling vigor. University laboratories have observed that tomato plants exposed to specific magnetic intensities develop root systems that are denser and deeper, allowing for superior nutrient uptake. The magic of the 1920s has been decoded into repeatable, undeniable data points. The question is no longer, does it work? But rather, why are you not doing it? The evidence is in the soil, and it is growing faster than the skeptics can print their denials. We have established the history and the science. Now we must secure the hardware. To replicate the results of the forgotten pioneers, you cannot simply throw scrap metal into the dirt and hope for a miracle. The blueprint requires precision, starting with your choice of material. Copper is the non-negotiable gold standard of electroculture. It is the second most conductive metal on the periodic table after silver. But more importantly, it possesses a unique molecular resonance with biological systems. When you introduce copper into the soil, it does not merely conduct electricity. It slowly leaches trace ions that act as antifungal agents and enzymatic catalysts. Do not use aluminum, which is toxic to root systems, and do not use galvanized steel, which corrodes into useless rust. You need pure, uninsulated copper wire. If you buy wire wrapped in plastic insulation, you must strip it naked. The plastic is a dielectric barrier that blocks the very atmospheric ions we are trying to catch. Equally critical is the geometry of your installation. You must orient your garden beds and your devices to align with magnetic north. This is not a suggestion. It is a navigational imperative. The Earth's magnetic currents flow longitudinally from the South Pole to the North Pole. By aligning your planting rows or burying your conductive wires in a north-south direction, you are harmonizing with the flow of the river rather than building a dam against it. This alignment maximizes the Lorentz force acting on the sap within the plant's vascular system. If you plant east-west, the plants effectively have to fight across the magnetic current, increasing resistance and lowering metabolic efficiency. The most common failure I see is the insulation error. New practitioners often stick a coated wire into the ground, turning what should be an antenna into a dead stick. The tip of your atmospheric antenna must be exposed to the air to facilitate the corona discharge effect, which pulls electrons from the atmosphere. The portion in the soil must be in direct contact with the moisture of the earth to complete the circuit. You are building a bridge between the sky and the soil. If you insulate that bridge, the toll gate is closed. Prepare your copper, find your compass, and clear your mind of the chaotic designs of modern landscaping. Nature loves order, and that order points north. To construct your first atmospheric antenna, commonly known as a culture unit, you do not need a laboratory, but you do need to follow the laws of conductivity with absolute precision. Start with a wooden dowel or a bamboo stake, approximately 2 meters in height, which will serve as the non-conductive spine of your device. You will need roughly 3 meters of bare copper wire, preferably 12 to 14 gauge, because mass matters when conducting current. Begin by burying one end of the wire at least 20 centimeters deep into the soil. This is your ground terminal, the delivery point for the energy you are about to harvest. Coil the wire spirally up the wooden stake, imitating the natural vortex patterns found in shells and galaxies, until you reach the top. At the peak, extend the wire straight up toward the sky, creating a stiff, vertical point. This tip acts as a lightning rod for atmospheric potential, utilizing the point discharge effect to bleed electrons from the air into your wire and down into the root zone. For those unable to build vertical structures, or for indoor plants near your sleeping quarters, you will employ the Likovsky coil, an oscillating circuit that requires even less material but more finesse. Take a length of stiff copper wire and form it into a simple circle or loop that fits comfortably around the base of your plant stem. But, and this is the most critical detail, do not let the two ends of the wire touch. You must leave a small gap of about 1 to 2 centimeters between the ends. This gap creates a capacitor. The loop becomes a resonator that captures background electromagnetic radiation and creates a localized oscillating field. By placing this open circuit around a plant, you are essentially placing the organism inside a protective energetic bubble that harmonizes external frequencies, allowing the plant to devote its energy to growth rather than fighting environmental stress. Finally, we integrate the magnetic component, the heavy artillery of this physics-based approach. Obtain a simple ferrite ring magnet or a strong neodymium magnet, but do not just toss it into the dirt. You must bury it near the roots, aligned with the Earth's magnetic field. If you are using a bar magnet, point the north pole of the magnet toward the geographical north. This alignment amplifies the natural flow of telluric currents through the soil. When you combine the atmospheric pull of the antenna, the oscillating protection of the coil, and the directional thrust of the magnet, you have built a trifecta of energy. You have transformed your garden bed from a passive patch of dirt into an active engine of growth, all for the cost of scrap metal and a few moments of labor. Installation is not the conclusion of this experiment. It is the beginning of calibration. You have constructed the receiver, but now you must learn to read the biological feedback of your subjects. The first indicator that your system is active will not be the size of the fruit but the color of the foliage. Within 2 to 3 weeks of installing a copper antenna or a magnetic array, observe the leaves. They should shift to a darker, more profound shade of viridian. This is not an illusion. It is the visual manifestation of increased chlorophyll density. The magnesium ions are being funneled efficiently into the porphyrin rings, turning your plant into a hyper-efficient solar panel. Beyond color, pay close attention to the structural integrity of the plant. You will notice a thickening of the stems and a waxy sheen developing on the leaf surfaces. This is the cuticle layer reinforcing itself, a direct result of improved nutrient uptake and silica mobilization. But perhaps the most telling sign is what is missing. In a conventional garden, you look for the presence of pests. In an electrocultured garden, you look for their absence. Insects are attracted to the infrared signals emitted by sick, low-voltage plants. By raising the vibrational energy and health of your crop, you are effectively jamming the radar of aphids and beetles. They simply do not recognize your plants as food anymore. However, a word of caution is necessary regarding intensity. Just as you can blow a fuse by surging too much current through a thin wire, you can stress a plant with an electromagnetic field that is too potent for its biomass. If you place a 3-meter lightning rod in a small indoor pot, you may see the leaf tips turning yellow or crispy, mimicking nutrient burn. This is energetic overload. The plant is metabolizing faster than it can hydrate. If you observe this, simply trim the length of your antenna or move the magnet slightly further away from the root ball. You are now the operator of a living machine. You must tune the dials until you find the resonance that makes the organism sing. This investigation is no longer just about gardening. It is about autonomy. We have traversed the buried history of Justin Christoflo, decoded the invisible voltage of the ionosphere, and handed you the blueprints to build your own energy receiver. You now possess knowledge that the agrochemical complex has spent billions trying to render obsolete. They want you to believe that abundance is a product you must buy, a subscription service to a patented molecule. But the physics we have discussed, the Lorentz force, the Schumann resonance, the telluric currents, proves that abundance is the default state of nature, provided you know how to tap into the circuit. The Green Revolution promised to feed the world, but it did so by strip mining the soil of its life and the farmer of his independence. It replaced the wisdom of the earth with the sterile logic of the laboratory. Now you stand at a crossroads. You can continue to treat your garden like an outdoor factory dependent on external inputs and toxic interventions, or you can choose to align with the cosmic mechanisms that have driven life since the dawn of time. So I leave you with this final provocation. If the earth itself is a battery that never dies, why are we still paying for the energy to grow our food? The copper wire in your hand is more than metal. It is a key to a prison cell you didn't know you were in. Do you trust the corporate logo on a sack of fertilizer? Or do you trust the 4.5 billion-year-old electromagnetic pulse beneath your feet? The switch is there. The choice is yours to flip.